Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for September 7, 2025. Our guest today is going to be Hrant Mikaelian, a multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. Welcome back, Hrant. Glad to have you on the Groong podcast again.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hrant, this week, the E3, which is France, Germany, and the UK, triggered the snapback mechanism of the JCPOA, the agreement between Iran and other countries on nuclear issues. And this snapback mechanism would allow them to reimpose sanctions on Iran for alleged non-compliance with nuclear limits. Iran, Russia, and China condemned the move and vowed not to abide by those sanctions. And these demands look set to sink the deal, essentially. One of the demands is international inspectors going back to the ground to Tehran and Iran. And the second is a return for talks to Washington. And on top of that, essentially, Washington wants nothing less than Iran's complete abandonment of uranium, of missiles, and more. At the same time, there are reports that Iranian MPs are considering a motion in parliament to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. So is the West pushing Iran into a corner? Could this be like the first steps towards another escalation, possibly also including the resumption of the war, or even worse?
Well, I think that as of now, probability of new Israel-Iran war is gradually increasing. What I can see is that both sides are preparing. Of course, maybe the experts who are diving deep into Iran or Israel, maybe they have another opinion, but what I can observe is that both sides are preparing for another round of escalation, which I think will be different in nature and form from the previous one. I'm not meaning that it will be completely different because the sides still don't have a border and they will have to throw weapons on each other through the air. But as of now, Israel does not have or almost does not have its spies in Iran anymore because Iran has caught hundreds of spies. So as of now, Iran is prepared much more because Iran is expecting the real war. Beforehand, Iranians would expect that there might be some conflict, some shooting, but not a real war. Now they do expect the real war. And from what I know, they are preparing to the next round and they are cooperating with Chinese and they are producing new weapons on behalf of themselves and so on. Well, so does Israel, but still Israel has very small territory and very high density of population and so on. Although many Iranian agglomerations are also vulnerable because Tehran has huge population and so on. So I think that Iran is preparing to a new war. Regarding the West's actions, West is not seeking any possible solution as of now. What we see, they are pushing more and more. US does not want to withdraw from its policy towards Iran. And basically this war was caused by Israel and US because Trump in his first term, he abandoned JCPOA. And now JCPOA is not in action anymore in reality. And Iranians also have made a statement that if the West will continue like this, they will abandon JCPOA as well. And they are not letting the Western nuclear experts to their sites anymore because we have seen how it affected the strategic defense of Iran. So as of now, I think, yes, Iran is pushed back and I think it will try to strike back as well.
How about the timing? I was going to say, Trita Parsi, who is a well-known and respected analyst, said that the attack could come before December and definitely as early as August. So we're past August, we're now in September, but he seems to believe that it will happen this year.
I think there is such possibility, and I think yes, before December is more likely than after. But still, you know, I'm sure that there is an ongoing second track negotiations because Iran never abandoned those. So maybe they are trying to somehow avoid it, but I don't think it will it will work out because Netanyahu is in same position where he was before. He did not achieve his goals. So basically, the previous round of Iran-Israel escalation was a draw. Neither side has won. Both sides have seen their vulnerabilities. Iran has seen more vulnerabilities, but it has fixed more of them as well. So as of now, it was draw. So if it was draw, then it is likely that sides will seek renewal of hostilities to see who is stronger by now.
Since the Iran war, which was in June, Pashinyan and Aliyev were in the Oval Office and signed an intent to open transportation links between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan via Syunik. This is essentially Turkey's Zangezur corridor, rebranded as TRIPP or the Trump route. The concern for us is that with the potential of U.S. presence in Armenia along the border with Iran comes the potential of turning the region into a powder keg. How credible do you think are the reports that TRIPP itself could be leveraged by Israel and the United States in the next war against Iran?
I think they will try to use it, but the main goal of TRIPP is not to use it against Iran, but to use it against Russia, because I think it's becoming more and more obvious that Turkey is striving to achieve Caspian Sea and pass to the Central Asia to start fueling it with weapons and prepare it to the conflict with Russia. So basically, they want to turn the Central Asia into new Ukraine. Now, as of now, Russia and China are, as I stated, they are standing back to back to each other. So China is, projecting its power to the South China Sea, and Russia is projecting its power to the Eastern Europe. So they are kind of, if we consider them as a union, or treaty, then they are trying to expand their influence right now. But if there is a conflict in between, they will have to shift into middle of Eurasian region, so into Central Asia. Both will have to, deal with the new situation, and that is how West will try to deter them on the Taiwan and Ukraine directions, respectively. So basically, I think this is the main reason for the so-called Zangezur corridor, because if all you want is transportation, then they have many roads through Georgia, and by the way, that roads, including Baku-Tbilisi Kars railway, are utilized by 50%, but not more. And they also have proposed roads through Iran. Iran said we also have a road for Nakhichevan and Azerbaijan to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Azerbaijan does not want it. Azerbaijan uses Georgian road, but still wants a corridor. What is the reason for the corridor? They need to transport something which you cannot transport through regular economic relations with third parties. So Georgia did not let Turkey to transport weapons to Azerbaijan through the land road. And now they want to transport weapons and maybe some, drugs, nuclear materials, something which is illegal, basically, through that corridor. This is the main reason for that corridor. Now, regarding the Iranian case, there are lots of discussions of militants transported here and there. Those are not very credible. But if Americans appear on the northern border of Iran, that will mean that they can effectively surveil or northern part of Iran. So Americans can have a surveillance points there, which they most likely will use. Because what is a big reason for US to be between Nakhichevan and Baku? I think it's not very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if we take into consideration the Central Asia, that adds to the equation. If we add Iran, that makes the whole puzzle there. And also, what is interesting here is that initially Turkey and Azerbaijan were trying to sell Zangezur corridor to Iran, saying that it is part of the middle corridor and so on and so forth. And now we see that it will not work out like that, especially given Americans are there, but not only. So it is corridor of war, corridor of Western Azerbaijan, and corridor of global conflict. And statements of lasting peace coming to the Caucasus cannot be farther from reality. The final thing is that in Iran there is a clash of interpretations on that, because in reality the current government headed by President Pezeshkian and also his MFA Arakchi, they support both corridor, and they support basically all of these pro-Azerbaijani activities in this region.
Hrant, is it support, or have they taken a wait and see attitude?
In reality, they support it. And I've seen one of the reports which they were presenting to the government, that if there is a power change in Armenia, there will be risk of corridor implemented by pro-Russian forces or by nationalists, which is completely fake approach. But what does it serve? They want to keep this government into power, first. Second, they are competing with the religious authorities which are against the corridor and against any increase of influence of Azerbaijan.
So you are saying that we have to actually
language.
You are saying that we actually have to dig into Iranian political divisions to really understand exactly what's going on in their split response for the TRIPP.
Right. In the beginning, Arakchi has said that he does support this corridor, this TRIPP, and the Trump corridor. And then there were statements on behalf of religious authorities that they are against. And then the government started, using the same language. They adopted the language of their counterparts, but they are trying to achieve completely different goals. And this is very important to observe. And we have seen some other statements by them, which also makes it obvious that they do support. And they are trying to limit the influence of religious leaders over the foreign politics, and also provide them with false information about the situation. So I think this should be tracked carefully.
Well, I have to say I am very flabbergasted by your response, because I mean, we knew that there was a mild response, but outright support from Iranian the constructivist camp is shocking, but not as shocking as, to me, what I'm going to say next, because as you say, this corridor seems to be designed against Russia. And many experts, in fact, see the TRIPP corridor as a strategic win for the US, opening the door for a direct American role in the South Caucasus. I was able to watch an interview by Paul Goble, who is the architect of the famous or infamous Goble Plan, which proposed that Armenians trade land in Syunik for independence of Artsakh. He was giddy. He seemed like to be that nerd in class who had solved the math problem before everyone else, and was now happy that at least part of his solution is coming to life. Well, we can go into details how much he predicted what would happen. He was saying completely different things. But in any case, effectively what he was predicting did happen, or what he wanted to happen did happen. And Goble says that the stakes in this Trump route are far more global than what they would seem. They would conflict with the INSTIC, they would conflict with even the Belt and Road Initiative by China. So against this backdrop, Russia's muted response is striking. A week ago, Pezeshkian and Putin declared that they backed the 3+3 format as a more effective mechanism for solving regional issues, but that was just declaration, And days ago, Deputy Prime Minister Overchuk told RIA that Russia in fact favors unblocking communications, and he voiced only limited concern about outside forces in the region. The only firm opposition to the Trump route is from the conservatives in Iran. How do you explain the Russian position on TRIPP so far?
Okay, so let me start from the Goble Plan, which was implying that Artsakh is becoming part of Armenia, legally recognized part of Armenia, not even an independent state, but Artsakh within Nagorno-Karabakh borders, so autonomous borders. The rest is given to Azerbaijan. Artsakh is getting the corridor, and Azerbaijan is also getting the corridor. Now, the forms of corridors would be different. What Kochyan has agreed, and which was in fact pre-signed by the sides, including Heydar Aliyev and Robert Kochyan, with mediation of Americans, was that the corridor would be, let's say, non-territorial corridor, basically a bridge between Nakhichevan and other parts of Azerbaijan. So that was a bit different from what Azerbaijan wants now, because they want now extraterritorial corridor on the land. And by the way, we have seen the map which appeared in occupied Hadrut, where Azerbaijan has portrayed whole Mehri region, as well as part of Kajaran region in the Azerbaijani rule, let's say. So basically, as of now, situation has changed. There is no Artsakh anymore, but Goble is still happy. Why is he happy? Because the real reason for that plan was not about Artsakh conflict. It was about the corridor. And basically, the whole US policy towards Armenia and Azerbaijan was about the corridor from the very beginning. It is very important because they have fueled the power change in 2018, and they have fueled identity change, so that Armenian society is, accepting these changes much more mildly than it would be expected in the 90s. So they have worked with public opinion and with political field in Armenia to make this happen for decades. I think this is important to state. And now regarding Russians. Basically, what Russians say, 3+3 and so on, indicates that Russians already have given up on the idea that they will be solely controlling the whole region of the South Caucasus. Because initially, 3+3 initiative was proposed by Erdogan in mid-2000s, and it was his idea to enter the region. So at that time, Russia was dominating force in the region, while Turkey was competing force, and the West was also competing there. So Turkey was trying to present itself to the West as its own, representative. Although we see how Turkey in reality tries to utilize West's position, but for its only own interest ultimately. And the same they did with Russia as well. Now regarding the 3+3, Iran and Russia still want this format, or already want this format, but Turkey doesn't want it anymore. We have not seen any statement on Turkish side about 3+3 for a rather long period of time. Why it is so? Because in reality, Turkey is getting increased influence in this region. They have rather big influence in Georgia, both economic and political, and they have signed a military agreement between the sides. I mean, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia all together. Now, in Azerbaijan, they have complete influence. They can do whatever they want. They affect the government policies completely. And now Armenia. In reality, this government is very friendly towards Turkey. And so we can say that Turkey is now the major power in the South Caucasus already. So 3+3 would somehow balance it and let Iran and Russia gain more legal mechanisms in the South Caucasus, and at the same time to limit influence of the West in the South Caucasus. So basically, as of now, Russia and Iran see this initiative as a possibility for them to regain influence or to keep influence and so on. But
Okay.
It's not the same. I mean, unblocking communications, as Russia portrays it, it's not the same as Turkish claim to open the borders, because first of all, Turkey wants to open the borders, but for them not to work only in Turkish direction. I mean, For example, now we see that Azerbaijan is discussing opening the corridor, but is not discussing Armenian citizens' possibility to enter Azerbaijan, right? So the conflict is over, as they say, but Armenian citizens and basically any Armenian in the world cannot enter Azerbaijan still. Or there are, of course, 23 prisoners of war in Azerbaijan, including the military and political leadership of Artsakh. But
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm sorry. Let me just ask something else, and then feel free to add whatever you think is missing. You're an economist, and or at least you have an economic background as well as a political. In his interview with the RIA, Overchuk noted that the TRIPP still needs investors, and he was saying that this is a stage that they haven't yet achieved. And he said that it will face stiff competition from other regional projects, such as the Baku-Tbilisi railway and highway. And he said that this is good for shippers because the prices will be cheaper, but it'll be difficult to achieve profitability. Meanwhile, the staunch advocates of the corridor, including some Armenian ones who I would say maybe are, sponsored by foreign money, argue that this trip will bring prosperity to Armenia and Armenians will become very rich. So let me ask you, how would you assess the economics of the Trump route, and are Armenians going to get filthy rich and prosperous as a result of this corridor?
Yeah, one of pro-government propagandists said that now the prices of property in Mehri will skyrocket, which is, nonsense. In reality, what Azerbaijan has said, and basically Armenian government has already confirmed, that they will not pay anything to Armenia. So yes, there will be some traffic, maybe even big, but it does not mean that Armenia will get anything out of it. That's first. Second, they will not stop in Armenia most likely, and they will not be stopped by Armenian authorities. So initially, Armenian government has stated that they are completely against the corridor, but they are for opening the road. So then they started speaking of outsourcing Armenian territory, and Trump said it will be 99 years, and then with extension of 99 more years. So, if a state which is 34 years old is outsourcing its territory for 99 years, and then plus 99 more years expected, then we're speaking of giving up the land. And then lately, Pashinyan has said that for Nakhichevan citizens or for Nakhichevan, there will be an exception that they will not be checked. They will get the free road to Azerbaijan. So that's the first step towards the real corridor. Now, we have two conflicting ideas about it. One is that the government in Armenia, one is that the government said that it is insisting that there will be a complete control over the territory on Armenian side. And another is that Aliyev is demanding that there will be no Armenian control over the road and over Azerbaijani and Turkish transportation. Now, who will win? Basically, we can remember that there were many times that Aliyev was stating something, Pashinyan was stating the opposite, and ultimately Aliyev always won. So unfortunately, I'm expecting this to happen again. Maybe because Pashinyan was, dishonest from the beginning. Maybe because he was weak diplomatically, or maybe he doesn't understand how to run the foreign politics and how to achieve your goals. I think all three approaches are correct in this situation, but I'm not seeing him being able to achieve the stated goal, because what he is doing is a policy without proper means. Now, getting back to Russia, Russia's main issue is poor strategic school and poor quality of long-term policy. And the second issue is its high engagement into Ukrainian conflict. So what they are trying to do is they are skipping any possible problems worldwide in order to finish the Ukrainian war. Now, in the discussions with Russian experts, we have said that this policy will lead to complete collapse on Armenian side, and we have seen already that Nagorno-Karabakh Republic or Artsakh has collapsed. And what they say is that basically we don't care about your collapse, we care about our collapse. And that means that if we might have problems here or in this region, we should avoid it at any cost. So that's their approach. And basically, they will try to avoid any possible conflict until the situation in Ukraine is resolved. That is why their response is mild. But what I can observe in Russian media, including the pro-state media, I see that they are very discontent. And I see that the official response was mild, but not because it's their political approach, but because they consider themselves not to be ready to, back the stronger position. So I think the position, Russian position towards the corridor will change after the end of Ukrainian war, or at least the hot phase of Ukrainian war, especially given the quality and direction of Russian-Azerbaijani relations, which since Russians led Azerbaijan to destroy Artsakh, has decreased and has devaluated towards almost open conflict. And by the way, one of Azerbaijani resources has spread opinion poll results, which we don't know how accurate it is, but anyway, according to that survey, 60% said that Russia is the main enemy of Azerbaijan, and the second was Armenia with 53%, and then there was Iran, there was France, and there was India. So basically 5 countries which are enemies of Azerbaijan: Russia, Armenia, Iran, India, and France, which we understand what it is. Basically, it's all about Armenia again. But anyway, Armenia has decreased because, now they don't see threat in Armenia, at least in Armenia under Pashinyan's rule. Otherwise, the figures have been
But they're targeting all the allies of Armenia.
Yeah, well, at least allies of this current government, not Armenia definitely, but of current government. That is obvious. And basically, what we have seen in the days of Shanghai Organization Summit, we have seen that Pakistan has recognized Armenia. I think that was by mediation of Turkey and Azerbaijan. So basically, I think that again Armenia is trapped into Turkish foreign policy. We can remember recognition of Palestine by Armenia, which was obviously directed from Turkey. So now we see more and more Armenian foreign policy is in line with Turkish foreign policy. But anyway, I think that as of now, Russia's stance is not what they really think.
Okay, Hrant, let's go to the next section, which is going to be the MPG poll that just came out a few days ago. For the audience, you are going to see the slides on the screen. That's going to be in Armenian, but we are going to have an English version of the questions and everything in the show notes. So you can go there, podcasts.groong.org/episode number. Okay, let's go to the first slide, actually slide 3, which was about the August 8 meeting in the White House. An agreement was signed in Washington between Azerbaijan and Armenia's governments and the United States witnessing it regarding the TRIPP corridor. This agreement provides for certain communications and infrastructure to pass through Armenia and Azerbaijan. The poll question asks, what is your attitude towards this agreement according to the following options, and gave them, options from positive to negative. And 42% were generally positive, 48% were generally negative, 10% undecided. So people seem to have a split view of the August 8 reality show, as I call it, in the White House, between Pashinyan and Aliyev and Trump. What are your thoughts about this poll result? And why are these numbers important, Hrant?
Well, these numbers show some change in public opinion, because what we have observed during at least last 2 years, or maybe 3 years, was that on any foreign political matter, some maybe 35% would support the government, and maybe some 50% would be against. Basically, not even 50, but 55 or 60. So basically that was the overall picture of the polls regarding the foreign politics. Now we see 42 against 48, or even a bit less than 48. So we see that support has grown and negative responses has decreased. There are basically two reasons. One is the overall expectation of peace, because in reality, many people do want peace. And if they do believe that this agreement will bring peace, they might welcome it, or at least they want this to be true. If we look at other questions, we see that people understand that it's not that much bringing peace, but still they want it to happen.
That's what the
Now,
perception is. Yeah.
yeah. They don't believe, but they still want it, which is understandable. On another hand, we see that how coverage affects the public opinion here. And the coverage in this case is very important, because during the summer we had several main events which affected public opinion, which were very densely packed in late June and July and beginning of August. So in the beginning, government started crack down on opposition. First, they attacked church and church leaders. So I want to remember that two archbishops of Armenian Apostolic Church are in prison, Bagrat Galstanyan and many of his supporters. So Bagrat of Tavush and Mikhail Ajapagan, Mikhail of Shirak province of Armenia. So two archbishops of Armenian Church are in prison. Both had very strong political attitude towards this government, and both are in jail. And also, government tried to attack the Catholicos and tried to dispose him and put a loyal person there. But this side of their plan did not work. Also because of weak response on the Armenian church side, they did not fully support Bagrat or Mikhail, which is also true. But anyway, the attack on church was one side, so public opinion has directed there. Then there was an attack on Samvel Karapetyan and his supporters, and he is also still in jail. So basically, he's the richest Armenian in the world right now, and he has rather big support in Armenia and in diaspora as well. So he has done lots of aid in Armenia, on the contrary to many other businessmen from Russia and from the West. So he has been engaged with Armenia from the very beginning. Now, that is also important. And those three were very important critics of the current government. And also many people after that, are afraid to speak out. So government took the informational space under control. They silenced the critics. That was the first step. Then they started finding minor and major PR, cases, including the J-Lo concert in Armenia. So they brought Jennifer Lopez, paid for that from the state budget, rather big amount of money, and started, Hysterios campaign that whoever is not supporting this concert, he is enemy of the people, and so on and so forth. Well, they're, as they love. And then, so they created a positive, preparation for that. And one of the next days, Pashinyan unexpectedly goes to Washington and signs this trip with Trump and Aliyev. And while the whole opposition camp was, in complete disorder, the government camp was completely ready. So they started a PR that, okay, now the long-lasting war is ended, and so on and so forth. We're bringing the peace and so on, and now we're closer to the West than ever, and so on and so forth. And they were able, with all these PR means, to increase their support rate. At the same time, on opposition side, what we see, they basically are unable to somehow contradict or somehow speak out, because, the leaders of opposition parties, their statements, you don't understand it. They are not even criticizing it or supporting it. What they speak is just purely irrelevant, not only to the TRIPP, but to anything, everywhere, anywhere in Armenia. Well, not to say that they are competing with each other and attacking each other, I mean, the parliamentary parties in Armenia, and by the way, again, according to this poll, they are losing the ground in Armenia, but at the same time, yeah, they are the main enemies of each other, so they are completely irrelevant to the case of Armenian politics.
So basically, a lot of government propaganda and jailing of opposition views has basically
worked in favor
contributed
of
to
Plus JLo's butt.
yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
also works. What
Let's
to
go
say.
to
So
let's go to the
bas-
second
yeah,
slide.
right.
Okay, well, here's another question on the poll. It's talking about the road through Syunik. Basically says, it has been announced that Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to open transport links. This also implies the establishment of a road through Armenia's Syunik region, connecting Azerbaijan mainland with Nakhichevan. Do you support the opening of such a road? And in this case, I think that the results are a little bit more shifted. So only 35% are positive, while about 59% are against this, and around 48% fully opposes. I guess our question is, will Pashinyan's democratic quote-unquote government listen to the popular opposition to this, which seems to be, 60% is not a bad number in terms of opposition to a project, to this project.
Well, I will divide my answer into three parts. First, start with democratic government of Pashinyan. Basically, if we look at major steps by Pashinyan, almost all of them were unpopular. So he's strong at creating overall impression, positive impression, but nothing specific. While if you look at public opinion over specific steps and specific policies, most of those have strong opposition in the society, which is very important to note. So if he was listening to the public opinion, he should have resigned long ago.
So
Or
how do
at
you
least
reconcile that? Like, how is it possible to have individual positions that people disagree with, but overall people are still sort of, favorable to you?
Well, what they do is narrative and emotional control over the society. And also they are trying to create a framework of opinions where you put something which is discussable, something which is outside of overall, discussion pattern. And they're trying to exclude most of, contesting or most of, opposition narratives outside of the mainstream agenda. That's what they do. And by the way, this is very similar to what we can observe in many Western countries as well. And I'm sure this media policy is also constructed not in Armenia. So that's first and important side. Second is, the extent of opposition towards this project. And the third is the wording itself. So, yes, you said 59% are negative about this road. But beforehand it was like 75%. So it's not that good as of now if we consider this road as a bad thing. So again, Pashinyan has largely improved his position in this term, but which is also important, the wording was rather manipulative, because in the wording of the question, we have seen that, do you support the road in Syunik for Azerbaijan, provided that Armenia also gains a similar road through Azerbaijan, which is unrealistic term, because in reality Armenia does not gain any similar road through Azerbaijan. I mean, if we could discuss this, if, for example, Armenia could get the uninterrupted road from Ijevan to Derbent in Russia, where no Azerbaijanis are stopping the goods. In this case, we would be able to speak about the similar road. Yeah, it is longer, but it is an interrupted corridor. And yes, it is similar in this case. Moreover, Azerbaijan is not even discussing opening the border. But anyway, what I can say is that the question is rather manipulative. So if you ask is as it is, you would still get a much bigger share of negative responses. And those who were negative, they are not negative of mutual border opening and so on. Well, many of them are, but many of them are not. They just don't believe the wording. They just don't believe that it will be mirrored by Azerbaijani policy.
Yeah. Yeah, this framing of narratives is very interesting. I don't have a question, but I just want to say that the same poll asked whether they agree that people will bring in that this Washington agreement will bring in long-lasting peace, and 40% of 39% of Armenians believe that yes, this would bring in long-lasting peace. So I'm just dumbfounded at that, and that seems to talk about your your idea about narrative control.
Okay, the next slide we want to look at was about changing the Armenian constitution. And the slide says, according to published information, Azerbaijan has emphasized constitutional changes in Armenia as a condition for signing a peace agreement. The question is, which statement do you support the most? And it said the Constitution of Armenia belongs to the people of Armenia, and no country, including Azerbaijan, has the right to interfere. And 58% agreed with this statement. The second one was, this is Azerbaijan's internal political move and has no importance for Armenia, 25%. And I would support changes to Armenia's constitution if it helps establish lasting peace and good neighborly relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and 12% were okay with that. Difficult to answer, or I don't know how to answer, was about 4.7% of that. So to me, basically, 58% of the people said that Azerbaijan has no business telling us what to do. The message sounds clear, and this presents a major hurdle for Pashinyan, who's planning a referendum to change the constitution according to Aliyev's wishes in 2027. And now, although that seems like a distant future because we still have elections to go through in 2026, what do you think about these results?
Well, first of all, add 25% to that 58, because they were also opposing, but in different wording.
Right. Yeah, the questions were not exactly choice one, choice two that are diametrically opposed. They really kind of crossed each other, and I didn't quite understand why they did that.
Yeah, the wording is still problematic, but you know what is the problem here? If Pashinyan starts constitutional change, he will never say that it was imposed by Azerbaijan. We might imply that, but he will not say that. So he can say we ourselves need a constitutional change. So I think Pashinyan understands that no one wants to change the constitution under Aliyev's demands. Although, yeah, not no one, now 12% is for that. Previously, it was like 4 to 5%. So there is a big shift here as well. But still a vast majority is opposing. But what is important here is that if you present it in a different way, many people might support it. So it will again be dependent on narratives and on propaganda and so on.
Yeah, I was not happy with this question actually. So as far as the constitutional changes go, the referendum, is it going to be in 2026? Is it going to be in 2027? Because I've read both ways. And what do you think about the feasibility of this? Is Pashinyan actually going to do it? Is he going to be successful? What's your view?
What I do expect is that they are going to have parliamentary elections in June 2026, 7th June 2026, and then in the shortest possible, according to the law term, they will try to have a referendum on that matter. So this will be presented as the same process. Of course, it will be a different process, but still this will be presented as the same process, part of the same process, and maybe they will even try to present another referendum on joining the EU. Of course, we know that EU does not, supporting Armenia joining EU, but EU supports Armenia trying to join the EU.
Hrant, it's why wouldn't the Armenian government change the legislation so that both the elections and the constitutional referendum happen at the same time?
They might try. Right now, they don't have a constitutional majority in the parliament, but there are several problems with that. First problem is that they don't have constitutional majority, and the things related to referendum, if I'm not mistaken, require it. I think you need specialists on constitution or on laws regarding to that.
Well, but they have supermajority already.
They have majority, but not the constitutional majority. So to change, foundational laws, they need more MPs than they have now, because several MPs have left the ruling party. That's
So Hovik Manucharyan and
and
you're talking about
But have
yeah.
they not
So
replaced those guys?
no,
no.
they're still in parliament.
Yeah.
Um,
Now that's the first part. Second part is, let's imply they are putting uh, both issues on the same ballot. Let's say one is election, another is referendum. Now it's both a possibility and a risk, because usually people do not support change of constitution. In reality, Armenia has adopted or changed constitution through referendum 3 times, and in 95, in 2005, and in 2015. Both 3 times, according to what we know, um, there was major electoral fraud. Both 3 times it was rejected by the population and then faked by the government. And now they will have to do the same. But there is a difference. The institutional change, which happened in, starting from 2016, especially, brought major changes to the electoral code. And now fraud is much more difficult to implement than previously. And you cannot have as big fraud. So it is really problematic for the government, and especially, the constitutional referendum or referendum is not supervised by other parties, while there will be a big mission of observers or party representatives in any remote place in Armenia during the parliamentary elections.
parliamentary, yeah.
So, they are
You're talking
dragging
about
moving,
observers from the OSCE and other institutions?
and also from parties themselves
Okay.
and the journalists and so on. So the attention towards parliamentary elections will be very big. Attention towards referendum is usually lower, especially on the side of political players. So if government wants to have a fraud, they need to distribute these processes, and they need to divide these processes in time. Now, even if they expect themselves to win in the parliamentary elections, they pretty much know that they will not have lots of votes, but what they can have is they can try to create a coalition with some minor partner, for example, the Republic Party by Aram Sargsyan, as they did in the Yerevan Council. So that's a realistic scenario for them to win. Now, imagine having at the same time the constitutional referendum where most likely majority will oppose, and then the elections. If any of major opposition players will bet hardly on the no in constitutional changes, they will get more votes, while government will lose. So they understand this scheme very easily. So for them, it makes a lot of sense to divide these processes. That's what they will do, because Azerbaijan is long time awaiting for this referendum to happen. First, because they know that most likely population will reject it, and then they will have, kind of casus belli. Or if it is adopted, even better, they will gain what they want, at least on this stage, through, maybe not peaceful, but without the war. Peacefully, but without the war. So basically, Azerbaijan wants this to happen. They understand that Pashinyan's legitimacy is limited, but a referendum will improve their legitimacy over their claims.
So let's talk about political prisoners in Armenia. There are several slides in the report about that. Slide number 7 asked whether you think there are political prisoners in Armenia today, and 62% said yes, 18% said no. That, like, 18% is probably the same amount that strongly support Pashinyan, so that seems to jive. And then when they asked to name a political prisoner, Samvel Karapetyan was named 71% of the time. After Samvel Karapetyan, it was Bagrat Sirpazan, 38%, and Mikhail Ajapahian. So all in all, and then there was another question about Samvel Karapetyan and how people felt about Samvel Karapetyan's arrest. And I would say about, let me read this. So 64% said that they were either fully or somewhat negative, while 18.5% said that they were positive towards that move. Now, that may seem to be a lot, but also the devil is in the detail, because if you compare that to figures from July or from June, in June, 16.5% had said that they were supportive of the move to arrest Samuel Garapetyan. Meanwhile, 77% were against. So the positive camp, it's within the margin of error, which is 3% for this poll. So, you could compare 16.5% to 18.5%, but in the negative camp, there was a huge shift from people who are against the arrest to undecided. So our question to Hrant is, what does this mean? How can a few months, cause such a huge change, at least in the people who are against Samet Karapetyan's imprisonment?
Okay, let me put it simple. A net negative of imprisonment of Samvel Karapetyan was 61% in July, in beginning of July, and 46% in the end of August. So 15% less net negative, which is significant shift, right? Now, how did it happen? First, the media campaign of Pashinyan, which I already have cited, and especially if there is expectation of peace, and most probably Pashinyan is trying to portray Samvel Karapetyan as radical, so I will bring the peace, he will bring the war, so if you support peace, you should support his imprisonment, and so on and so forth. That's the overall idea about it. But what is also important that when they cite that the number that 71% consider 71.5% consider Samuel Karapetyan to be a political prisoner, that refers only to that part of the population who said that they are political prisoners in Armenia. If we look at overall population, then 44.3% say that Samuel Karapetyan is a political prisoner, which is very significant part of the overall concept, because those who do not say that there is political prisoners, they were not asked the question, who is a political prisoner in Armenia?
Okay, point well taken. And we're just gonna skip to the last slide, which is, how would you vote if elections were held this coming Sunday? Again, here we see an interesting dynamic. Civil Contract Party was mentioned with 17.3%, which is a rise of 4.2% from June, I guess, of this year. Meanwhile, Samet Karapetyan is now a prominent second runner, and he got his party, or the party that would be run by him, was 13.4%, which is a 10% rise. So we see clearly that Samet Karapetyan is rising in polls. Meanwhile, most others, I guess, remained unchanged in terms of their support. Is there an opportunity for the opposition, for instance, Samet Karapetyan's new movement, to record some success in 2026?
Well, I think there is a chance. First of all, these figures definitely indicate the chance. Although there have been some, some other polls which have shown, let's say, more conservative results towards opposition and had some higher shares of the government and lower shares of the opposition. But still, what is important as of now is that Samvel Karapetyan's bloc is on the second place right now. So he displaced the Armenia bloc from the second position, which it held for 4 years. So as of now, the main opposition is Samvel Karapetyan, who is cannibalizing the parliamentary opposition of Armenia. So while
But we didn't see any drops in the parliamentary opposition, did we? I guess
they did have it. It's just not mentioned. I mean, they mentioned only changes in top two blocks. But if you can see that their joint, they have increased their percentages by 15%. Who has lost that percentages? So basically, Samvel Karapetyan took the percentages from Armenia Alliance and from the Republican Party of Armenia.
But there are also some undecided, right? Because I think the undecided last time was about 60%. I think that was based on
it was more or less like this. So no, they are cannibalizing opposition. And I think Samvel Karapetyan technically he can win in an election if his team will work, in a modern terms, active, aggressive, and professional way. Which I'm not sure, frankly speaking, because the way I described the campaign, this is how the government is running the campaign. But opposition was never successful in this matter. And now what we see that Samvel Karapetyan's team is betting on economy, which is rather wise move. But you cannot win only with economy because Pashinyan is betting on the geopolitics. And that's where he is winning right now. And if you don't compete with him on that term, I mean, you have no chance as well. So I think that Samvel Karapetyan has chance. He has potential. And he has lots of potential. But how he will utilize it, how his team will be able to utilize it, that's dependent on them as well. And I think that if they will do everything correctly, they will win. But what I see, I don't like one major fact. Samvel Karapetyan is in jail already for almost 3 months, and nothing major happens in the country. Many people we have seen, as of now, 64% are against that. So it's easy to accumulate that approach. Nothing is being done. And that I see as a big problem of his campaign. So if they are able to utilize this protest energy to accumulate, these approaches, I think they can win, but that will depend on them. Now, regarding the civil contract party, they have limited pool of voters who can vote for them. So they will bet on the either on the electoral code, which will give them majority even if they don't have enough votes. I mean, guaranteed majority, which is a principle of Armenian electoral code, which was also adopted with many positive changes. That was also adopted by the Republican Party in 2016. And by the way, there was a discussion that they should remove it after Pashinyan came to power, but he decided to leave it as it was. And then he will bet on the minor partner and on spoilers, which he will try to, raise until the elections. As of now, spoilers are very weak, but still he will try to do his best to get their support. So we see Dog Party has decreased, Republic Party has decreased, but he will try to somehow raise them again.
But I want to ask you exactly about those parties. For example, Vartan Ghugasian's Dog Party, which currently has about 2.5% at this poll. Are they taking their voters from civil contract, or are they taking it from the opposition side? Who are they poaching more?
Initially, I think they took voters from civil contract, but then they have completely split it. And now their voters are, belong to the pool of undecided because they play, against everyone. But this stance of against everyone has played in favor of Pashinyan in Yerevan elections because they did not let the opposition coalition to form. But anyway, I think the Dog Party is more connected to the pool of electors who are undecided.
Yeah. And it looks like all of these things that we're talking about represent about 55, 56% of the electorate, because in the polling results, we see about 45% are in the sort of undecided bucket, will not participate, undecided, difficulty telling you an answer. Those three categories are 45%. So really, there's some convincing to be done. So I think that if the opposition wants some votes, they have to go out there door to door and start convincing people that they are the right people to vote for.
That's what they never do.
Okay, well, let's go on to our final topic, which is going to be the Armenian economy, Hrant. The Lewis Foundation released its report on the Armenian economy in the first half of 2025. And as expected, there is some slowdown which may have bottomed out in March or April. And since then, it's been rebounding. The slowdown is attributed to a 12% decrease in the industrial sector. For our listeners, I'm big on rounding these numbers and giving you something that we can remember. 12%. It's actually 12.1%, but I'm going to round things up or down so that we can remember what the number was. Anyway, the slowdown is attributed to a 12% decrease in the industrial sector, which itself is being blamed on the very significant decrease in the re-export sector, which last year had reached, I think, a $12.4 billion mark. And as Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk has been citing, it's barely over $6.1 billion right now. Hrant, we knew that this re-export sector was by its nature a temporary phenomenon. Everyone called it due to external factors, to avoid saying Russian sanctions busting trade. What do you think will be the effect of this sector's decline on the Armenian economy in 2025?
Right. Everyone was expecting that if re-export stops, then Armenian economy can lose significantly and can contract like 10% or something. That was overall expectation. Now we see that it will not work like that because the sanctions against Russia are not released in one day. They are not expected to be released in one day. But rather what we see that effective release of sanctions will happen gradually. First stage will be Russia avoiding sanctions in a more and more efficient way. Second stage will be West blinding an eye of sanction avoidance. Third stage will be removal of sanctions by some actors, which is more likely as of today to be the United States. And then the last stage will be removal of all sanctions, which will imply that Armenia will lose its re-export potential very gradually. And it will not have that much effect on Armenian economy as it was expected in the beginning. That's one thing to note. Another thing to note is that the re-exports significantly stretches the economy and creates a wrong impression of economic growth, but also on economic decline as well. For example, if we look at the industry from the beginning of the year, we have seen 20% decrease. Now it's 12% decrease, or even 9.8% decrease right now. January, July data. But if we exclude re-exports, we see that there is 4% growth. So basically there are two economies right now. One is Armenian economy, another is re-exports and everything connected to sanctions avoidance, and those two do not interact with each other that much, because those are just geographically close to each other, but not in terms of economic output. So that's also important to note. And dynamics of exports is very complex, a bit hard to track, but I have an impression that it's still growing at rather slow pace, but it's still growing, not decreasing by half as we see, because re-exports last year, it was some 80% of overall export of Armenia. So decrease of re-exports by 60% is causing like decrease of exports by 47% or something. So it distorts Armenian statistics to the extent that we are not able to see the real economic situation in the country anymore. But still, yes, and we have Armenian dram increasing towards US dollar, which also creates tensions and creates problems for local businesses. But anyway, not that big that it starts collapsing. Although we have some sectors which have been affected, and those are externally oriented sectors, including IT and tourism in
the services sector, maybe.
In services sector, yes, and the agricultural exports and some industrial exports in the real sector. But anyway, still we see that overall economy is rather growing and at rather high rates. It's about, if we exclude exports, it will be some 8.5% of economic growth, which is rather high. Still, of course, it is being fueled by the incomes from re-exports, which is also important, because if we lose those, then economy might contract.
Hrant, is the re-export money actually playing in the Armenian economy? Is that money actually coming and doing something inside the country?
Yes, some of it comes as investment money. Some of it finances imports, including not only the consumption imports, but also imports of raw materials or imports of some technical equipment and so on.
Yeah, I
So
was actually wondering if it's feeding into the construction industry because that had a 20% growth rate recorded in 2025, which is very significant. And I was wondering if that re-export money is being invested by oligarchs, rich people, and what have you. Those are the people who are doing the exporting and re-exporting kind of stuff. They are the ones who
it is.
would be investing in, let's say, real estate, construction, etc.
It is, but not only that is a reason, because Armenian construction rates were low during the whole period of independence, with a very short period of high growth rates in 2005 to 2008. And since then, there was a collapse during the economic crisis of 2009 to 10. And then there is a gradual recovery, which includes this year's 20% growth. So as of now, the demand on construction market is exceeding the supply. So that is another reason. But yes, oligarchs play a major role here as well.
Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about the export difficulties that we've had, because over the past few months, we've seen areas of industry and manufacturing which have often been among the country's top taxpayers. For example, beverages, including alcoholic beverages, those have come down. Minerals, those have come down. Are the problems on Armenia's side of producing these things, or are they on, I'm just going to say, political problems, for example, exporting them through Georgia or to Russia?
Yeah, there was some conflict with Georgians, because Georgians are trying to leverage their geographical position towards Armenia, and they are trying to gain more out of this trade. They proposed a deal to Armenian exporters and to Armenian exporters unions that Georgians will, somehow become part of Armenian producing chains. Although Georgian materials there were more expensive than what Armenians were importing from other countries, but Georgians were trying to leverage. Armenians tried to avoid, complying with these agreements, and Georgians started leveraging their position in a very direct manner, just stopping Armenian exports. And I think this is also due to Georgian industrial lobby, which affects its government, and also due to more and more nationalism in Georgian politics, because right now Georgian government is very nationalistic and is rather anti-Western. And anti-Western it is because it is nationalistic, not because it's pro-Russian, as some propagandists would say. But anyway, it is nationalistic, and of course it will support its own industrial sector, and it will support its own producers at expense of Armenians, of course, given that they have this leverage. So even until now, there are problems with different products appearing here and there, especially with some agricultural and industrial products. But again, even industrial are connected to the natural production and so on. So, and then wines, beverages, and tobacco and flowers and so on. So these problems did not stop. And then there is another expected problem with Russians, because Russians say you need to understand, are you staying in EU, I mean Eurasian Economic Union, or you are joining the EU, as you are stating? If you are going to EU, let us abandon EU and let you lose all the benefits you got there. And what Pashinyan has said, that as of now we don't know. When there will be time to choose, we will make the choice, but not now. Which basically implies that since EU does not make any offer to Armenia, we will stay in Eurasian Economic Union. But at the moment we have any chance to join the EU or to join any, form of EU association or something, we will do that. And we will still, by the way, try to keep all the benefits from Russian side. But Russians are saying that if you are going in that direction, we will stop you from benefiting there. And that is another question to arise, but not now. Maybe the next year, especially after the Ukraine war is over.
I think all this talk about the EU even Pashinyan knows that nothing's going to happen for 10 years. And if he expects to be the person to solve those problems in 10 years, then I think he's going to deserve the
Yeah,
same
he
medal
knows
that
that for
Aliyev
sure.
has for staying in power for long enough. Back to the economy, Hrant, one of the areas in the Lewis report was of interest, and that was the area of the government's programs, which have been underperforming. And in some cases, they're underperforming by 3/4. Like they've been achieved by about 25%. I don't want to go down the list because we don't have time. We'll put those things in the show notes if you want to see them. But I wanted to ask about why some of these areas are deeply underperforming. I do want to mention a couple of them, which are very, very important. The Ministry of High Tech Industry has implemented their digital transformation program 7.4%. Okay, that's basically not doing the job. Another area is the development program for the military industrial complex achieved 4.7%. These are things that are simply not being achieved. Why do we have this radical underperformance on the part of the government? What are they doing if they're not doing their jobs?
Well, first, let me create an overall picture. The budget has increased. Incomes have increased by 14%. Expenditures have increased by 15.6%. So overall, budget is increasing, which is important. So this is mainly due to economic growth and the inflation, of course, because it's not inflation adjusted. But still budget is increasing. Now, regarding underperformance of some sectors, basically, since this government came into power in 2018, we have this picture repeated again and again. So capital investments in Armenian economy are underperformed since 2018, every year by some 50%. So that's how they work. I don't know exact reasons,
Let
but
me interject for 1 second. We have talked to American experts who have said incompetence and inability to carry through the projects is one reason. Now, I'm not going to put that on you. We've heard this offline with them that a lot of these ministries don't have the competence to actually carry through the projects to their completion. They just bog down and stop.
well,
But
this
go
is
ahead.
obvious. This is obvious. This you could not even mention because of this government. I mean, everything they touch, they do it incompetently. But still, this should be not the only reason. But I don't know exactly of other reasons. But yes, incompetence is in play for sure. But there is another thing regarding to finances which I want to mention is that yes, on one hand you see that the budget is increasing, economy is increasing, but the debt is increasing as well, and at rather high pace. So basically, at the beginning of August, we had $14 billion of state debt.
That's right.
Including mainly distributed by equal halves. One is 7 billion, almost 7 billion being the external debt, and a bit more than 7 billion being internal debt. So the debt is increasing at very high rate, and it has increased since the end of the previous year by more than $1 billion. And in last month, it has increased by $240 million. So in Armenian scale, it is very big, big change, especially given that, when you do have economic growth, you basically need to give your debts back, and then you acquire new debts when you have a war or economic crisis. Now we acquire new debts during the period of economic growth, which is also can bring us to the incompetence. But we see that yes, they do a lot of spending, especially on their own salaries. But anyway, I think this is rather worrying because as of now, right now, the state debt is increasing at very high rate. In just 7 months, we see 1.2 billion increase, 1.25 billion increase. So in 1 year, it might climb up to 2 billions new debt just within 1 year.
You know what worries me about this is that when you talk to experts, they say, well, as long as the debt to GDP remains stable and there's economic growth, this is not a major problem. But the reality is that the GDP actually counts in that crazy inflated number for re-exports, which are, we've talked about this, that they're probably going to go away. So in a couple of years, when we look at the GDP and it has shrunk, it means that the debt to GDP effectively is going to be extremely high. That's going to hurt Armenia's financial rating, international financial rating, and it's going to be very difficult to refinance some of the debt and acquire new debt. I see this coming down the pike at some point.
That's for sure. You are very on point with this comment, because yes, Armenian dram is exaggerated because of these re-exports and so on. So in dollar, we have had $25 billion GDP last year, but if dram will devaluate back to its normal pace of 480 to $1, it might drop to $18 billion, but the size of debt will remain almost the same. So the share of debt to GDP will increase. But not only that, I mean, yes, during the periods of high economic growth, the debt to GDP ratio should decrease. It should not stay stable. As I say, it should decrease. Because if you are acquiring, 8% of GDP new debt in 1 year, that's what we observe right now. It's not normal. The EU has normative of 2% of GDP, new state budget deficit, within 1 year, which I would say is a normal share for a country like Armenia too. So I would say that Armenia should try to avoid increasing this threshold at any period other than war or crisis. Now we have neither, so we should be having very moderate debt growth, or even not to have it at all, and try to somehow cover the debts, or at least keep the debt stable. I mean, acquire new debt to cover previous one, but not the new one at all. So that is rather worrying, I would say.
For the sake of time, I think I'm just going to call it done, except for one question. What's your outlook for the balance of 2025 for the economy?
I think overall it shows a bit better track than it was expected in the beginning of the year. So I can say that as of now, we are generally we stay in positive trend of economic growth. But to which extent it is supported by these increased debts or some other external circumstances, that we should also understand. But at least two significantly positive things I have observed this year. First is renewed agricultural growth, because since 2017 we had decline in agriculture almost every year, and now we had resumed growth in agricultural production. Of course, we need to wait until the end of the year, because first half is not enough to understand, because main period for the agriculture is the third quarter of the year, and we have the statistics of the first 2 quarters. But still, we have seen noticeable economic growth in agriculture. And the second thing is that there is continued growth in a number of registered employees in Armenia. So it's not as high as it used to be, but it's still significant. So now, on one hand, we have observed growth in unemployment, but that also can be attributed to growth in overall population, because there was influx of Artsakhi refugees. And of course, it's a bit harder for them to find a job. But at the same time, we have number of registered employed growing, which is also a positive trend. So overall, I would say that Armenian economy as of today is still rather healthy than unhealthy.
Yeah, the agricultural sector has actually reported that the crops were very good. The difficulties that they were experiencing were mostly on the export side rather than the growing side, at least for 2025. It's a good thing. So I'm just going to call it quits at this point, even though I had a number of other questions in the economy. We'll go forward, but let's move. I do want to ask you, even though we are going long today, I do want to ask everybody for any thoughts that they have to share with our listeners. Hrant, what do you want to talk about?
I want us to track the developments around the genocide memorial very intensively and carefully, because with what we are observing as of now is pure vandalism towards this monument. Many people believe that they are trying to destroy it or somehow keep it busy with renovation until the next April 24th. And of course, Turkey is looking at it and is definitely considering it as a good message on behalf of Armenian government. And we have heard, like, when, of course, to major share, Israel's president, when he recognized Armenian genocide, it was a hypocrite recognition, but still he did. And now we can count Israel as one more country which is recognizing Armenian genocide, although again it was not parliament, but still. And then what Pashinyan said, he said it's not good for Armenia as of now. Of course, for Pashinyan's Armenia, which is pro-Turkish, it is not good. But basically what we see is very well-shaped policy against keeping the memory of Armenian genocide and trying to give it to the historians. And it would be adequate on one hand, but with remembering about it, but only in the case if the consequences of genocide are eliminated, like Israel has. Consequences of Holocaust are eliminated. Jews, of course, remember it and make their, own understanding of it. But consequences of Armenian genocide are continuing. And part of it was ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, which took place just 2 years ago. So I want everyone to keep track on, keep a close eye on the Armenian genocide memorial and its renovation, which is being done in a very barbaric way.
Yeah, Hovik and I have been tracking it. We haven't really talked about it on the show because it's been very difficult to find any kind of renovation plan or anything. We had a friend who went to Zizernagapert and sent us some video about what's going on. Obviously, there is renovations needed. It needs a little bit of a facelift, but we cannot tell exactly what they're doing, how long it's going to be. It's just very difficult to find any kind of details. Hovik, what's on your mind?
I'm gonna skip today, so let me ask you, Asbed, what's on your mind today?
Well, I don't have a statement either, but I do have another question for Hrant. And we have asked this from other guests, so it's always good to have a little bit of a ability to bring many people's thoughts on the same thing. At the August 8th reality show at the White House, why didn't Pashinyan demand the return of any portion of our sovereign territory back and even just one prisoner back? In fact, we have it on video that he
demanded them to stay there.
Yes, exactly.
He demanded them to stay there. Well,
why did Trump offered him
yes.
to request from Aliyev to release the 23 prisoners. He says, you want your Christian leaders to come back, right? And Pashinyan just looked at him like a deer caught in headlights and basically said, no, he didn't want it in writing in the thing. Whether it was in writing or verbally, why didn't he say, yeah, it would be nice to have those people back?
I will bring two reasons here and we'll try to be exact on the point. First, Pashinyan plays Turkey's and Azerbaijan's game. Just like that. That's first. And second is that he understands that if those are back, his political position will worsen a lot. He's catching people whom Azerbaijan does not like in Yerevan, and Aliyev is catching people whom Pashinyan does not like in Baku. That's a joint game. No question about that.
Okay. We're going to be done for today. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Hovik, did you want to do a kitchen sink?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you always complain that our shows are too late, too long. So, and you did add an entire economy section the last hour of the recording. So
you're blaming me for lengthening the show.
Sort of, yeah, kind
Okay.
of. But I think that we've kept our audience,
But
you know,
our
enough.
audience has basically responded supporting you in this. They've said that they don't mind the longer shows.
Yeah. The other thing is it's really hot where I am right now. So I think I'm gonna kindly request that we
Okay.
not do the kitchen sink.
Okay, folks. Whether it's weird or too corrupt, I guess we're going to blame the weather and not do the kitchen sink this time. We'll do it next time. So that's the show. That's all the time we have for it. And that was our weekend review recorded on September 8th, 2025. We've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. And he is also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute. For more information on everyone in this episode, you can go to podcasts.groom.org/episode number.
Yep. And just a regular reminder, you know, if you're not subscribed to us on Apple Podcasts yet, you know, we really want to grow on that platform. So please go ahead and do that. Whip out your phone and just do it right now so you don't forget. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Subscribe to our Substack pages also. I've been trying to get my friends to subscribe to us. Boy, do we have a lot of friends who are not subscribed. You know, they talk to us about watching the video or whatever, but they haven't subscribed to the channel. They don't add to our, let's call it influence.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. I've got a lot of friends who I would think would be very interested in monitoring our podcast, listening to it, but our audience comes from different places,
I
and
know,
it's
I
kind
know,
of
it's just
good. It's
crazy.
like, you know, it's interesting, yeah.
They go, hey, I didn't get notified that you have a new video. I want to see that. And you go, are you subscribed? Oh, well, no, I'm not subscribed to the channel. You have to hit that subscribe button, folks, and then you'll probably get notified when we
Yeah.
add new shows. Take care. I'm Asbed Bedrossian in Los Angeles.
And I'm Hovik Manucharyan in Los Angeles. Take
Good
care.
to have you here. Bye-bye.